It started with a simple craving for late-night fries. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but cravings have a way of leading to bad decisions. And that night, the worst decision I made was getting in my car and heading out alone at 2 a.m. The streets were unusually quiet. A thick fog blanketed the road, illuminated only by the yellowish glow of the streetlights. As I turned onto Highway 27, the road stretched ahead like a gaping mouth, the darkness swallowing everything beyond my headlights. I turned up the radio, but it didn't help. It wasn't just quiet, it was silent. No crickets, no distant hum of engines. Just the faint whir of my car and my heartbeat in my ears. Halfway through the drive, I noticed something off. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared. Car was following me. Not unusual at first, except for how close it was. Tailgating me, its high beams flooding my car with an unrelenting glare. I tapped the brakes gently to signal, back off. The car didn't slow down. Instead, it swerved slightly to the left, like it was considering passing. But it didn't. A chill ran down my spine. I figured it was just some jerk messing around. Ignore it, I muttered to myself, gripping the wheel tighter. But as I approached a red light, the car sped up, its engine roaring, and pulled to a stop right next to me. I turned to glance, trying to act casual. But there was no driver. The car was empty. The light turned green, and I slammed the gas pedal, speeding ahead. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. My mind raced with logical explanations, but they all felt absurd. A prank? Some new kind of self-driving car? My phone buzzed in the cup holder, startling me. I glanced at the screen. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A distorted voice rasped, "Pull over." I hung up immediately, my heart pounding. But then, my car's headlights flickered, and the engine sputtered. The car behind me honked. Loud, long, and relentless. My headlights died completely, leaving only the glow of the high beams from behind. The road ahead vanished into the darkness, and for a moment, I felt like I was floating in some endless void. Then I saw it, *them star. In the distance, figures stood scattered across the road, their silhouettes barely visible through the fog. Each figure held something. A lantern, maybe? No, they were too bright, too unnatural. I swerved to avoid them, my tires screeching on the asphalt, and looked in the rearview mirror. The figures were now behind me, standing perfectly still, their glowing objects pulsing like a heartbeat. The car following me was gone. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. It was a text. "Don't stop." Panic surged through me. I floored the gas, the speedometer climbing higher than I'd ever dared. The fog thickened, wrapping around my car like a suffocating cocoon. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the road opened up. The fog lifted, and I was in a familiar part of town. The diner was just ahead, its neon sign flickering weakly. I pulled into the parking lot, my hands trembling as I killed the engine. For a moment, I sat there, trying to steady my breath. The silence was back, heavy and oppressive. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, and there it was again, the car, parked a few spaces away. As high beams flicked on, flooding my car with light, and then I saw them, * the figure star. They were inside the car now, their glowing objects pulsing in sync with the trembling of my heart. The car door creaked open. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted inside the diner, the bell above the door jangling violently. The cashier looked up, startled, but I couldn't speak. I just pointed outside, gasping for air. He walked to the window, squinting into the parking lot. "There's nothing out there," he said. I turned to look. The parking lot was empty. I never got those fries. I stayed in the diner until the sun began to rise. I couldn't bring myself to leave, even after the place emptied out and the cashier gave me weird looks for nursing the same cup of coffee for hours. The parking lot stayed quiet, but every now and then, I thought I saw movement in the reflection of the window. A flicker of headlights, a silhouette darting between parked cars. When dawn finally broke, I told myself it was safe. Rationality was creeping back in, convincing me it had all been a stress-induced hallucination. I paid my bill, left a generous tip, and stepped outside into the morning light. The air was cold, the kind that bites your skin and wakes you up fast. My car sat where I'd left it, looking painfully ordinary in the daylight. For a moment, I stood there, debating whether I should just call someone to pick me up, but I couldn't think of anyone who wouldn't laugh in my face. So I got in. The engine started with a comforting rumble, and the radio came on, playing some cheery pop song that felt like an insult to the night I just survived. I rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air and began the drive home, sticking to the busier streets this time. Safety in numbers, right? Nothing happened for the first 10 minutes. I started to think I'd imagined it all. But then I noticed the silence again. The hum of the city seemed muted. No honking, no chatter, no birds. Just the sound of my tires on the asphalt. And then my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I told myself it was a spam message, or maybe a concerned friend finally checking in. But when it buzzed again, 3 times in rapid succession, I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed it from the passenger seat and glanced at the screen. "Why did you leave?" The message was from an unknown number. My chest tightened. Before I could react, another text came through. "Look in your back seat." My stomach dropped. My hands froze on the steering wheel. I didn't want to look, couldn't, but the rearview mirror was right there, and my eyes betrayed me, darting up to catch a glimpse. Nothing. The back seat was empty. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a photo. Shaking, I opened it. It was me, sitting in my car. Right now. The photo was taken from behind, like someone or something was sitting in the back seat, leaning forward to snap the picture. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. I whipped around, ready to confront whatever was back there, but the seat was empty. Still empty. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Don't stop." The car behind me honked, and I jolted. A middle-aged man leaned out of his truck window, shouting something I couldn't make out. I waved an apology and hit the gas, forcing myself to keep driving. The rest of the ride home was a blur. Every shadow on the road felt like it was alive. Every car that passed me seemed to move too slowly, like the driver was watching me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was drenched in sweat. I ran inside, locking every door and window. My house felt alien, too quiet, too still. I grabbed a kitchen knife and collapsed onto the couch, clutching it like a lifeline. The phone buzzed again. "We're not done yet." And then, just as quickly, the power went out. The darkness swallowed the room in an instant, leaving me clutching the knife in a death grip. My phone was the only source of light, its faint glow casting long shadows across the walls. Every creak of the house felt amplified, every distant sound outside like a promise of something closing in. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but my thumb moved on its own, unlocking the screen. Another message popped up, its simplicity far more terrifying than any threat. "Upstairs." I froze. My breathing turned shallow as my ears strained to pick up any sound from above. The house had always been quiet, but now it felt suffocating, the silence pressing against my eardrums like a scream that hadn't yet happened. The ceiling creaked, a slow, deliberate sound, like someone or something was shifting their weight. I stood, the knife trembling in my hand. My mind raced through my options. Run out the front door, call the police, hide. But the messages, they knew where I was. If they could text me from the back seat of my car, they could probably find me anywhere. The only option left was to face it. I crept toward the stairs, each step feeling like a leap into the unknown. The knife felt useless, a child's toy against whatever had the power to haunt me like this. But I gripped it tighter anyway, as if it could somehow tether me to reality. The second floor was darker than the first, the hallway stretching out like the throat of some great beast. My bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of pale light spilling out from inside. I stopped at the top of the stairs, my stomach churning. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, barely louder than a whisper. I wasn't expecting an answer, and when one didn't come, it somehow made everything worse. I stepped forward. The light from my bedroom flickered, as if daring me to come closer. My phone buzzed again, the sound sharp in the oppressive quiet. "Come in." I swallowed hard, sweat dripping down my temples as I inched closer to the door. My hand reached out, fingers brushing against the wood, and I pushed it open. The room was empty. At least that's what I thought at first. My bed was unmade, the sheets twisted into a mess I didn't remember leaving. The closet door was open just a crack, its darkness impenetrable. The window was wide open, the curtains fluttering in the still air. But then I saw it. On the wall, above my bed, words had been scrawled in jagged black letters. "You can't run forever." I staggered back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a call. The screen read, "Unknown caller." My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something compelled me to answer. The line clicked, and for a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice, low, guttural, and dripping with malice. "Do you want to know how it ends?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed, my lungs refusing to draw breath. The voice laughed, a horrible, choking sound. "You already know." The call ended. The phone screen went black, and then, from the closet, something moved. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even a shape I could recognize. It was just darkness. A void that seemed to stretch outward, swallowing the room inch by inch. My flashlight app flickered on instinctively, but the beam of light didn't penetrate the shadow. It only illuminated what looked like eyes, dozens of them, all staring at me. I didn't scream. I didn't even think. I just turned and bolted, the knife clattering to the floor behind me. The hallway stretched impossibly long, the stairs twisting like a maze. My feet pounded against the wood, but the house no longer felt like mine. The walls seemed to shift, the air thick and heavy as if I was running underwater. I burst out the front door into the daylight, gasping for air. My phone was still in my hand, the screen lighting up with one final message as I reached the middle of the street. "We're not in your house anymore." I turned back, expecting to see my familiar little home, but it was gone. The house was gone, and behind me so was the street. I stood in the middle of nothing. The street, my neighborhood, my house. All of it was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of mist and darkness. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, but when I looked down, there was nothing but void. Just me, my phone, and the oppressive emptiness pressing in from all sides. My breathing was ragged, the silence so thick it felt like it was crawling into my ears. I spun around, searching for any sign of familiarity. A tree, a car, a street lamp, but the mist seemed to shift and ripple, teasing me with the suggestion of shapes that vanished the moment I focused on them. And then, in the distance, I saw it. Headlights. They appeared slowly, cutting through the mist like knives. At first, they were small, like the glow of fireflies, but as they grew closer, they separated into two distinct beams, illuminating nothing and everything all at once. My stomach twisted into knots. It was the car. My feet refused to move, rooted in place as the headlights drew nearer. The air around me seemed to vibrate with the sound of an engine, low and guttural, like a predator growling before it pounces. The light washed over me, blinding and relentless, and then the car came into view. Except it wasn't a car. Not really. The shape was there. A sedan, sleek and black, with windows so tinted they looked like mirrors. But the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't reflecting anything. Its surface rippled like liquid, shifting and warping as if the car was alive. The headlights weren't even lights. They were eyes, glowing and pulsating in a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. The car came to a stop just a few feet away, its engine falling silent. The mist around me thickened, curling toward it like it was drawn to whatever malevolence lay inside. My phone buzzed again, the sound startlingly loud in the unnatural quiet. I looked down at the screen, my hands trembling. "Get in." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. My voice barely made a sound, swallowed by the mist. But the car's passenger door creaked open on its own, revealing a black void where the interior should have been. There was no seat, no dashboard, just an endless, swirling darkness that seemed to beckon me forward. My instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The mist was closing in, and the ground beneath me felt less solid with every passing second. I glanced behind me, hoping for some escape, and froze. They were there. The figures, dozens of them, their glowing objects pulsating in unison like a heartbeat. They stood motionless, faceless shadows that seemed to watch me without eyes. And they were getting closer. The phone buzzed again. You have no choice. My body moved before my brain could protest. I stepped toward the car, each footfall heavier than the last, like I was walking through wet cement. When I reached the open door, the void inside seemed to expand, pulling at me like a gravitational force. My hand gripped the edge of the door frame, and for a moment, I hesitated. But then the figures moved faster, their glowing objects brightening as they closed the gap between us. Their presence was suffocating, their silent approach more terrifying than any scream. I climbed into the car. The door slammed shut behind me, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the car. I was sitting in the driver's seat of my own car, parked in my driveway. The early morning sun was just beginning to rise, painting the world in soft hues of orange and pink. Birds chirped in the distance, the sound so normal it felt like a slap to the face. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the diner, and my mind had conjured the entire nightmare. But then I looked down. In the passenger seat was my phone. The screen was lit up with one final message. Welcome back. For now. And in the rearview mirror, for just a split second, I saw them. Asterisk the figures, asterisk standing at the edge of the driveway, their glowing objects flickering like dying stars. Then they vanished, leaving nothing but the faint echo of my own panicked breathing. I haven't driven at night since. You'd think that after a night like that, I'd be safe, that maybe I could piece my life back together and chalk the whole thing up to some freak occurrence. But safety, asterisk real safety asterisk, is a lie. And that's the scariest thing I've come to understand since it happened. The weeks that followed were normal, at least on the surface. I went to work. I went to the grocery store. I went through the motions of my life, trying not to flinch at every flicker of a shadow or strange sound in the distance. But no amount of normalcy could erase the gnawing sense that I was being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. Things started to happen. Small things at first. Lights flickering in my house at exactly 2:07 a.m. Every night. My phone buzzing with no caller ID, calls that played only static. Finding my car door unlocked in the morning, even though I was sure I'd locked it the night before. Then the bigger things began. One night, I came home to find my kitchen chairs stacked on the table in a perfect pyramid. The front door was still locked, every window closed and latched. Another time, my phone's photo gallery was wiped clean, replaced with dozens of pictures of a foggy highway. My highway. But the worst was the dreams. They started as flashes of headlights cutting through mist, the sound of an engine roaring somewhere in the distance. Then they became something else. I'd find myself back in that misty void, with the car idling in front of me, its glowing eyes fixed on me like a predator sizing up its prey. And the figures would always be there, waiting, their pulsating lights brighter with every dream. I stopped sleeping after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all building toward something, some final, inevitable encounter. And 2 nights ago, it happened. I was lying on the couch, dozing off despite myself, when I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked out the window. The street was empty. But my driveway wasn't. The car was there. The same sleek, black sedan, its surface rippling like liquid. The headlights, asterisk eyes asterisk, pierced the darkness, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the yard. The air outside felt heavy, charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't want to look, But I knew I had to. Time's up. Come outside. Asterisk asterisk, I stood there, frozen. My mind screamed to stay put, to lock the doors, to hide. But deep down, I knew there was no escaping this. If they wanted me, they'd get me. They always had. So I went outside. The air was colder than it should have been, my breath visible in the eerie glow of the headlights. The car door opened on its own, the void inside waiting for me like a black hole. But this time I didn't feel fear, just resignation. I took a step forward, then another, until I was standing at the edge of the void. I leaned down to look inside, and for the first time I saw them clearly. The figures, dozens of them, packed inside the car like shadows pressed together. Their glowing objects weren't lanterns. They were orbs, swirling with light that seemed alive. They pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Like my heartbeat. One of the figures reached out, its hand, or what should have been a hand, hovering inches from my face. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then it spoke. Not out loud, but directly into my mind. Its voice a cold whisper that seemed to bypass my ears entirely. You belong to us now. The void pulled at me, a force so strong I thought it would tear me apart. My body leaned forward, but just before I fell, I whispered, "No." The world exploded in light. Blinding, searing light that burned through the mist and shattered the darkness. I don't know if it was me or something else, but when I opened my eyes, I was lying in my front yard. The car was gone. The figures were gone. And for the first time in weeks, the air felt normal. Still, but I know it isn't over. The lights on my street still flicker at 2:07 a.m. My phone still buzzes with those calls. The static now mixed with faint whispers I can't quite understand. And sometimes, when I drive down the highway at night, I see headlights in the distance, following me just a little too closely. They let me go, but only for now, because I belong to them, and someday they'll come back to collect.